In the beginning was Ginnungagap, the room without doors, windows, floor, or ceiling. There was no art on the walls. In fact, there were no walls, and no space beyond them. But the room had two corners. One was hot and dry, the other was cold and humid, and where they met, a poison fumed. Out of this poison, having dripped from the cold humidity towards the lukewarm middle, sprang a cow, and then a creature with arms and legs. Ymir, he who hums, without kin and of uncertain sex. The tooting primeval giant was, however, not long alone. New beings oozed from his sweating pores, and they looked a lot like himself. They were much smaller than Ymir, though small is probably a misnomer in this scale. His limbs and members fucked each other and became with child. Children sprung forth in increasing numbers. Some had 7 arms, others 3 legs, 900 heads, cauliflower ears, pig eyes, and concave, inverted faces. A dewy rock came hovering, a salt block, cold and humid, levitated through the room, without walls, through a window that did not yet exist. The cow began to lick away at the salty boulder, and I'll be a monkey's uncle if a new creature didn't pop out of that too. But this was different. It was a sculpture of a creature, a practically perfect and symmetrical being, a god. Buri, he who shapes. He settled down among Ymir's kin, called the Jotnar, or giants. He got laid too, and from his line a new people sprung, called the Aesir, the gods. Odin, which somewhat simplified means mind or ecstasy, lived there with his brothers, Vili and We, in the Aesir diaspora, who, despite some genetic relation, had little in common with their Trollish neighbors, who were born of the poison of pure life. Now it was getting hard to breathe in there. It was getting crowded. There were wights of all kinds, ogres, trolls both great and small, and buckets of Jotnar. Grotesque critters who cried and chuckled, scratched and yanked and bit each other's tails. They shrieked and farted with rivalry in an eternal cacophony without beginning nor end. Yet, for the most part, they were drowsy and did nothing at all. They merely sat there and trembled so hard that they began cracking at the touch. Skin to skin, with sparks and cinders flying. All the while, Ymir did their eardrums in with his incessant tooting. His atonal shriek was incomprehensible. It was so cramped and so loud that one could hardly even hear oneself think. All was white noise and entwined asymmetrical anatomies in this massive room of no ambition. Then one day, the gods decided they'd had it with this damn mess. They'd had it with time and space without direction, and so they killed Ymir and ripped him apart, piece by piece, limb by limb, so blood and guts spattered in all directions. That was the day that culture came to Ginnungagap. The Jotnar clung for their lives to each hair of the primeval giant's convulsing hulk of a body, members and genitals contorted in post-mortem spasm, severed feet and elbows stampeded across Ymir's own carcass without even a floor to fall on. Ginnungagap was filled with billions of ogre cries, both ear-deafening and faint, as their ancestral father trampled them all into oblivion. Their lifeless bodies flushed into the toilet of eternity by the blood that spilled out onto the vast, expansive anti-floor, flooding the pre-cosmic room. But the gods, realizing that this was their chance, kept their cool. They squeezed the juice out, weighed the body down, tugged and broke it apart until a landscape revealed itself. The flesh was torn off the bones. Standing tall as mountains, they fashioned the sky from the skull of the ancient giant and exhibited it in the highest heavens. Thus the world was created, an assemblage of bones and innards. The gods spoke, and the word began to breed words. The deed began to breed deeds. New life, new floras emerged. First natural, then artificial life. The few wights, ogres, and trolls that survived the bloody deluge sought shelter in glens, caves, under bluffs, or in the deepest recesses of the earth. The gods engineered creatures of their own to toil in their various cosmological tasks, to haul the dawn and divide the hours. Once they had separated night and day, land and sea. They dug ditches, timbered houses, tilled the soil, ate food, drank drink, played games, and recited verse. But this was not enough, for the gods had much to do, and were too busy to populate the earth, the very front line of the eternal war of gods and giants. They created man and woman, dull and impotent beta copies of themselves. The humans impersonated the gods, repeating their great work in every undertaking. But they were fragile and unimpressive little things. The fact remained that their dependency, as well as their tendency to die like flies, was seen as a benefit by the divines who desired no competition. Mankind was separated from wild animals by virtue of their intelligence, consciousness, and self-destructive neurosis. We stood lodged in the middle between over, middle, and underworldly powers. We stood lodged in the middle. While we descended from gods, we lived among trolls. It was inevitable that trolls' blood came to pump through our veins. Now we live in a world of time and change, where nothing stands still, the polar opposite of the pre-cosmic space, quite unlike the world of the ideal forms postulated by Plato. There were no archetypes in Ginnungagap that defined the ideal shape of a fish or differentiated it from a chair. It demands that the pre-cosmic state is described through allegory and negation. Nonetheless, order would never occur if chaos had not provided its source. We live in a world pretending to cater to humanity, though it exhibits cold animosity against us at every turn. That is why we saw the need to move indoors, assemble in cities and villages, and make fences, till the soil, and lay tarmac. To the gods, art was the ultimate goal. To fashion a world that was completely artificial. But we don't live in such a world. Art, in one sense, is the opposite of nature. The troll, whether it lives in so-called nature or within ourselves, forces itself to the surface as often as it can. There was a time when they lay with broken backs, in the mythological Golden Age, but that was long ago. The gods had left us to our own devices, but man was there when the troll rose again. They want back, not to a world of yesterday, but the day before yesterday, to the primordial, boundless gap. They have not forgotten Ymir. Potent and vitalistic culture is microbial compared to the natural universe. This is why we depict chaos and disorder symbolically as natural landscapes, uncultivated land and forest. We are destined to cut our way through the jungle, to chop it down and make order, or die. The founding of any society or culture relies on access to resources, and so man carries culture like a torch through the night, trapped in the coincidence of opposites.